Lawmakers and observers expected Wednesday's negotiations to end the partial government shutdown to be strained. Instead, they disintegrated entirely. They ended with President Trump walking out on a meeting with Democratic leaders and the Speaker of the House calling the president petulant. The shutdown is on track to become the longest of all time if it continues into the weekend. CBS News Chief Congressional Correspondent Nancy Cordes reports.
The meeting did not last long.
Democrats said the president abruptly ended their talks today, and he didn't dispute it. A total waste of time, he tweeted. I said bye-bye.
He sort of slammed the table, and when Leader Pelosi said she didn't agree with the wall, he just walked out and said we have nothing to discuss.
With roughly 800,000 federal workers due to miss their first paycheck on Friday, the two sides couldn't even agree on what went wrong.
I don't recall him ever raising his voice or slamming his hand.
President Trump is holding out for $5.7 billion in border wall funding to combat what he calls a crisis.
How much more American blood must we shed?
But government figures show the number of people caught trying to cross illegally is actually near a 20-year low.
If illegal immigration at the border has gone down, why is it a crisis now?
You know why it's gone down? Because of good management, because of me and my people, because we've managed it well.
But then why is it a crisis?
We have more people coming up. You have caravans. Nobody ever heard of a caravan.
He came to the Capitol today to urge Senate Republicans to stick with him. A small but growing number don't want to hold up funding for more than half a dozen federal agencies while this wall fight drags on.
There was a vigorous discussion.
Thank you so much. Did you raise any concerns?
Mr. Trump denied that party support is slipping.
You're just making that up.
And he insisted that many furloughed federal workers want him to persevere.
So many of those people are saying, it's very hard for me, it's very hard for my family, but Mr. President, you're doing the right thing. Get it done.
Democrats accused him of making that up.
Speaker Pelosi, the president has said that he thinks that federal workers are on his side.
This is another example of the president being almost delusionary about what it is. And he says that to us. Oh, the workers are calling me saying, I'll stay out without a paycheck as long as it takes. And that's like, well, who? Give us names. Name names. But the fact is, it's not right.
Nancy Cordes joins us now from Capitol Hill. Hi, Nancy. The House just voted to reopen the Treasury Department and the IRS. 8 Republicans sided with Democrats to pass the bill. Did that number come as a surprise?
It did come as something of a surprise to Democrats, Tanya. They thought that the number would be a bit higher. Last week, when Democrats tried a similar approach to reopen all of the shuttered agencies at once, about 6 Republicans voted with them. So they thought that, now that a week has gone by and all of these members of Congress are hearing from their very concerned constituents who are federal workers who might be about to miss a paycheck, they thought that more Republicans would be able to peel off from the president and side with them. And the fact that there were only 8 Republican defections is a sign that the president's coalition is holding for now. And that's important because it means that he has very little incentive to change course. The assumption among Democrats is that if they just hold out long enough, more and more Republicans are going to become uncomfortable with this strategy because many of them weren't huge fans of this fight for border wall funding in the first place. That might happen at some future date, but it doesn't appear that it's happening right now.
So the coalition holds, at least for now. And Vice President Mike Pence says Democrats were, quote, unwilling to even negotiate. Is that a fair assessment, though, Nancy?
A lot of revisionist history about what went on in that brief meeting inside the Situation Room in the White House. Democrats came out very quickly and said that the president had slammed his hand on the table and stormed off when Nancy Pelosi said that she didn't side with him on border wall funding. And then Republicans, including the vice president, came out with a very different story. They said the president never slammed his hand on the table, that actually it was Democratic leader Chuck Schumer who was raising his voice, and that the reason that the president was frustrated was that he said to Speaker Pelosi, So if I do open the government now and then we continue to talk about border wall funding, will your position be any different 30 days from now? And they say that she said no, that her position wouldn't change. And that led Republicans to feel that it's Democrats who won't budge rather than themselves. And so this is why we're sort of at an impasse at this point, Tanya. There are no meetings scheduled. There are no backroom deals taking place as far as we can tell. And after the way that this meeting broke up so acrimoniously, it doesn't appear that anyone has any high hopes that suddenly there will be a breakthrough at the next get-together, whenever that is.
And meanwhile, Nancy, as you mentioned, thousands of federal workers will not get a paycheck on Friday. A group of Republican senators that are already feeling the heat met today. And what came of that meeting?
Right. We saw a little under a dozen Republican senators get together at the office of Republican Lindsey Graham this afternoon. And what they're discussing is any way out of this impasse. Not all of them have publicly broken with the president. In fact, most of them haven't. But we know them to be senators who are uncomfortable to varying degrees with this strategy, who may want more funding for border security, who may not want funding for a wall itself, but don't like the idea of shuttering about a quarter of the federal government while this gets hashed out. Many of them have federal employees who live in their states and who are already feeling the pain of this shutdown, or who anticipate feeling a great deal of pain if it goes on. They came out of that meeting saying that they were going to continue to talk and bat around ideas. The problem is that those senators, unless they were to come out as a bloc and say to the president, we don't approve of your strategy, you've got to do something else, it's unclear how much influence they're going to have, because after all, this is not your typical negotiation where you've got Republican leaders and Democratic leaders in a room and all of these senators could then put pressure on their leadership. You've got the White House taking the lead in these negotiations, and it's just not clear that the president is going to be swayed by, some ideas that a handful of senators have come up with, when he is clearly at this point bound and determined to hold out for at least $5.7 billion in border wall funding.
And so, Nancy, it seems as if we're at an impasse here. What are the next steps, and what is the end game?
That's very unclear. House Democrats for the next couple of days are going to continue to hold these votes to open shuttered agencies one at a time to sort of keep the message out there that they believe that they are doing what they can to end this shutdown, that it could all be over tomorrow if Senate Republicans would just take up these Democratic bills from the House and pass them themselves, and dare the president to veto bills to reopen federal agencies. But the Republican leader in the Senate has already said those bills are dead on arrival, that he's not going to take them up. And so, aside from lots of press conferences and lots of posturing, it is truly very unclear to us right now, Tanya, where any of this goes, and where federal employees can find any sort of light at the end of the tunnel right now.
A very scary moment for our government. Nancy Cortez on Capitol Hill. Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.